Welcome to In the Funnel. My name is Mark Cox. In the Funnel is a group of sales coaches and consultants that help B2B sales teams dramatically improve revenue. Clients come to us when revenue growth is stagnated, or their sales team is not meeting expectations, or they need to recalibrate their sales and go-to-market plan for the upcoming year. Our clients have enjoyed tremendous success working within the funnel, and please hear it straight from them by listening to the testimonial section of this website. What they'll tell you is there's two things that make us unique and different in our space. Number one, we have a process and a methodology. First, for understanding your current state, and then second, for building your sales and go-to-market plan for the upcoming year. The second thing that makes us unique and different is that everybody within the funnel has run a material sales organization in their recent past. We're all practitioners. We don't have any theorists or teachers, and what that means is we can get in front of your sales team and run the next sales meeting, or join them on their next sales call to close your next large prospect. All of us have a passion for professional, disciplined, process-driven sales, and we'd be delighted to talk to you if you're looking to grow revenue for your company. Please feel free to reach out to us through this website at info@inthefunnel.com or by telephone. Thanks for taking the time to watch this.
And one of the things that we've learned through vertical development is that people operate from one of three operating systems, internal operating systems. So one is where they're focused on standing in. So they want to stay safe, stay comfortable, and feel like they belong. Another operating system is they want to stand out. They want to advance. They want to get ahead. They want to win. Of course, we see a lot of salespeople in that level. But then there's the third level, which is our internal operating system is programmed to create value, to contribute, add value, and lift others. And I think that's really where, all the success mindsets, growth, open, promotion, and outward, if you have those, you're going to be up in that value creator mode as opposed to that progress maker mode. And that's the leap that I feel like when I work with sales organizations, that's the leap I'm trying to help them to make, from that progress maker to that value creator.
Mr. Fauser, we have a great podcast today, sir. But first, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mark. I'm really doing great. I mean, we've got our years. We're starting to plan on next year right now, right? So it's the different caps coming on, and we're starting to look into next year's planning. And talk about a great time to have Ryan Gottfredson on about mindsets, because having a good mindset right now is what I need to make sure that we've got a decent plan heading into 2023.
Well, and by the way, I love this topic. So folks, as David said, today, the book we're getting into detail on from Ryan is Success Mindsets, your keys to unlocking greater success in your life, work, and leadership. And, before we started today, David and I were just so excited about this topic because mindset is really that key multiplier in sales. There used to be that old formula that said, mindset plus skill set plus tool set equals performance. And where we are today is it's skill set plus tool set times mindset equals performance. It's that important. It's the true multiplier. And Ryan Gottfredson, he's a Ph.D., he's a mental success coach and a cutting-edge leadership consultant. He's also a professor at Cal State University. And this book is just spectacular. He references a lot of the great research over the last 40 years on mindset. We're both fans of Carol Dweck in the book Mindset. Many of you have read that one, certainly heard us talk about it on the podcast. But just a tremendous conversation today with Ryan. He's got an energy and enthusiasm, by the way, about this topic. And he's almost like the Google of mindset, where he's gathered all this great information, but he's brought it in and packaged it so well, David, that it's easy to understand and start to apply.
Mark, I almost see him as like the Circus du Soleil of mindsets. because you know how they
Whoa,
reinvented the
nice.
circus? Yeah, because they reinvented the circus, and like I almost feel like I was learning about mindsets again for the first time. And he's just has this knack of telling, I mean, all those stories from the book, and they've stuck with me. And he just has this really great simplified way of getting his point across, so clear and concise. And I think that anybody, well, first of all, they don't know who Ryan Gottfredson is. They're going to in a couple minutes, but I think they're going to find themselves picking up the book. Then they're going to be going on the website. They're going to be checking out his blogs. They're going to be doing his tests, and he's got this wealth of free information. And you know, and I think, you know, Mark, when you think about it, like there's a lot of people that say, "Where am I going to get my training from?" Right? And I think that when you have people like Ryan out there that are, you know, willing to first of all offer this information for free in some circumstances, it's really a fantastic way to really get the edge out there. And that's what I'm really excited to ask him some questions today.
That's great, David. You know, team, a couple of things we talk about today, and certainly contained in the book, which are great. The different types of mindsets. We always think of the fixed versus, you know, closed growth or fixed, pardon me, mindset. But there's really four. There's fixed versus growth. There's closed versus open. There's prevention versus promotion. There's inward versus outward. And we're going to talk to Ryan about the definitions of all of those. We'll also talk about where salespeople, you know, typically exist on that continuum, which ones are most prevalent with them. There is the discussion around why, you know, we know mindset's a multiplier, but it really leads to influencing our thinking and our learning and behaviors. And those three things are probably the key metrics for determining our success in life, however we want to define it. We do talk about a bit of a spoiler alert with Ryan's new book coming out, and these different mindsets, mindset 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, and the percentage of the population that sit in each one. And 1.0, where you're kind of standing in, then you try and stand out, and then you try and create value for others in the world. So these different mindsets that you sort of evolve to. And finally, I think the neat thing we talked about was what triggers someone to want to try and change their mindset, particularly if you've been successful. You know, what's causing it? So really appreciated this conversation, folks. David, great to have you join this conversation. Everybody's going to realize that after they listen. Folks listening, hey, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast if you enjoyed today. And if there's things we can do to improve, we always want to hear from you. Let's enjoy the conversation with Ryan. Hey, Ryan, welcome to the Selling Well podcast, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Thanks for creating space for me. I've been really looking forward to this.
Well, we are really looking forward to this as well. And as is the case moving forward, I'm joined by David Fauser. And for everybody out there, David is a past client of In the Funnel, runs a very large sales organization, 150 people. How are you doing today, David?
I'm doing wonderful. And, I'm so excited to talk to Ryan. I was on vacation last week. Ryan picked up your mindset book, and I zoomed through it in 3 days. I just couldn't put it down. So I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I look forward to hearing what you thought and any questions you have as we go along.
So gang, the book we're talking about today is Success Mindsets, Your Keys to Unlocking Greater Success in Your Life, Work, and Leadership. And Ryan, I guess 2 podcasts ago, it was Anthony Iannarino or Mark Hunter were on the show with us here. And in professional sales, there's always been this kind of mantra out there. And the mantra was mindset plus skill set plus tool set equals success. And I wish I came up with it, but they came up, it was Mark came up with it. Mark Hunter came up and he said, listen, that formula doesn't work anymore. The real formula now is skill set plus tool set times mindset equals success, because mindset is just so incredibly important. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but tell us a little bit, Ryan, about what led you to your journey. I really like this part of the book and the introduction.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for asking it. And it's mindsets is now the key differentiator. Everybody else has caught up with skill set and tool set. Mindset has now become the key differentiator.
Love it.
And here's how I stumbled upon this, which to me was just a big light bulb moment. Is I did my Ph.D. at Indiana University. I studied leadership, and it allowed me to review the last 70 years of leadership research. And this was awesome. But one of my biggest takeaways is that there's been one question that we've been primarily focusing on. And that question is, what do we need to do to be an effective leader? And for a sales audience, we could also consider, what do we need to do to be an effective salesperson? And this is a good question. And we really love answers to this question because it gives us like this bullet point check that we could just check off the things that we need to do. But that never sat well with me because particularly when I think about leadership isn't about doing the right things. It's about being a certain type of person, being somebody that others want to follow. And so since my PhD program, my primary focus has been on how do we tap into the being element of leadership. And when I say leadership, I think that's everybody. I think leadership is not about position. It's about one's ability to be a positive influence in the lives of others. And so, and I think what I've come to learn is that mindsets is perhaps the best way to focus on our being.
Oh, fantastic. So let's define mindset. There's kind of this conceptual definition, I guess. There's a bit of a physiological definition, more physical definition, but let's talk about conceptual. What is mindset? Because we all hear about this.
Yeah, and this is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine because I think in some ways, and I'm sure there's listeners who feel this way, is the mindset, if you just search mindset in Google, it's just watered down. It's very vague. I think generally we think about mindsets as being our attitude towards something, like what is my sales mindset? What kind of attitude do I have towards sales? Not that that's terrible, but it just doesn't get to the depth of richness of what mindsets really are. So Mark, I'm looking at you as you're wearing glasses, is because mindsets are the mental lenses that we wear that shape how we view the world around us. Because how we see the world shapes how we think, how we learn, and how we behave. Like, let me give you a quick example of this. David or Mark, either one of you, how would you say that most people respond to constructive criticism?
I think most people become a little defensive, and I can speak to myself also. I've certainly seen times in my past where depending upon who delivered it and what the environment was, I may have been either thinking to myself, oh boy, what an opportunity to get better. That's great feedback. Or I might have been thinking, well, that person's wrong. And here's the 3 reasons I can tell you they're wrong.
Yeah. Right. Even just in your answer, you're saying at different times, I can make meaning of constructive criticism in different ways. When I see constructive criticism as an attack, then I will get defensive.
Yes.
And then how I think about it is negative. Will I learn from it? No. How will I behave? Well, I'll fight back or I'll run from it. Well, if we see constructive criticism as an opportunity to learn and grow, how will we think about it? We'll think about it positively. We'll learn from it. And then how we behave as we actually approach it. So again, it just at a foundational level, how we see our world shapes how we think, how we learn, and how we behave. And in fact, both psychologists and neuroscientists have identified mindsets as being the most foundational aspect for why we do what we do. And it's because it shapes how we think, how we learn, and how we behave.
Well, I like that analogy so much in the book about the sunglasses. And when I'm going to try on my next pair of Ray-Bans or Maui Jims, sometimes I go to the yellow lenses and everything looks really strange and weird. And it's actually certain things stand out. And then I'll go over to the more traditional amber lens or brown lens and everything's different. And I just found reading the book, actually, Ryan, even thinking about that, it gives me a little trigger for those listening that when I go into that next meeting with someone who might be giving me constructive feedback, that which lens am I wearing? Just even thinking about it intentionally. David's a good example. I'll pass it over to David, but David started joining these podcasts because he was so keen on them, but he also gave very good constructive feedback. And he'd be saying, this is so great, but here's the 2 or 3 things you could do to improve it. And the way he gave the feedback, and I know his intent is to help, I could be totally open to the feedback. And so I really process this, where somebody else might give me a little bit of feedback and I go, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah,
Does that-
absolutely, Mark. Yeah, but you were open to it, right? So that, and you have a great mindset. And, I was really curious, Ryan, when I was reading your book, and this is the burning question that I have. And the one question is, do you know the character you talk about at the very beginning where people feel they're great leaders?
Mhm.
And there's this gentleman that's running this company, and he thinks everything's going great, but people are leaving him. And then I got to further on your book, and I took the quiz that you have, and I was really interested in the results that I had received. But then I was really curious how, like, if you have maybe a fixed mindset or a certain mindset, and you think you're a great leader, and then you take your quiz, could that, like, how would that result come back? Would it come back that he would maybe validate that maybe he is open-minded? Because do you understand where I'm going with that question?
Yeah. So part of what I'm reading into your question, and you push back on this if I'm not understanding it right, can you game the system when you take the mindset
Right,
assessment?
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, you can. One of the things that's in the favor of the mindset assessment is that, here's what I think goes on, is, and you can push back on this, but I think that most people think that their current mindsets are the best mindsets to have.
Right.
I mean, the reason why they have them is because life has taught them these are the best mindsets. And if they thought they could have better mindsets, they would have changed already.
Right.
Now, when we start to learn about mindsets and we put labels on them, it's only then that we can start to introspect about them.
Right.
So most people who take my mindset assessment, they come approaching, I have great mindsets. And if you take my mindset assessment, there's been 30,000 people who have taken my mindset assessment. And only 2.5% are in the top quartile for all 4 sets of mindsets that the mindset assessment focuses on. And when you take the assessment, you're given polarized statements, and you say, to what degree does this match kind of who I am? And what I find is that people who have, for example, a fixed mindset, they naturally gravitate towards the fixed mindset answers. And that feels like the right answer, if you will, to them.
Right.
People with the growth mindset, they gravitate to the other end of the spectrum. And that feels like the right answer. So it's actually, what I find is that unless you really know this stuff, it's actually pretty hard to game the system, because it's your mindset that tells you which item is right versus wrong, if you will. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And like, I guess what I'd be also curious, Ryan, is somebody who takes the test, and I've taken the test. I spent a lot of time, I think, just naturally overthink things. I just think I sat there and like, what advice would you give? Should you just go with your gut and just get it done? Or should you, sort of overthink it a little bit and do the test?
I think it's fine either way.
Okay.
Here's the thing that I hear, and I'll push back on you this, and in doing so, David, just, I know we're virtually, but just like, imagine me giving you a big warm hug and say, welcome to the club. In that, if we've got some mindset work to do, you're normal. Most of us do, myself included. But here, it's just really funny, the responses that I get from people. And I would say what you just said is a pretty common response, which is, I didn't like my results. I think I overthunk it. Right? That's kind of what they say.
Okay.
But it's not uncommon for me. Let me give you even another example and this has happened. Oh, gee, I wish I could count how many times this has happened. But I get an executive who takes my mindset assessment, and I'm set to go into their organization and talk about it like the next day. And the executive sends me this email, says, I can't buy into this. This is completely wrong. Like, the results were not an accurate representation of me. And I'll get an email like this. And there's one instance where I got this email, and of course, the person seemed hot. So I'm going to let them cool a bit. And I didn't respond. And I wake up the next morning, and there's another email in my inbox from this person. And the person says, Well, last night I had a good conversation with my spouse, and I think it's going to be really important that I attend this session. And it's
That's
like,
great.
which is, and but to me, this is the value of, I would say, my mindset assessment and framework is that it provides us with tools and languages that allows us to introspect at a level we've probably never introspected it before. And that allows us to awaken to deeper parts of ourselves and ultimately these mindsets. And when we awaken to them, it's only then that we're going to be able to do something about it. And so hopefully for most people, even if you don't get good results, it's welcome to the club. You've got a starting point and you have clarity on where you need to go. And let's go about getting there.
Well, which I really like, Ryan, because I mean, when I read your book and I listen to, like, Mark's got a lot of great stories himself too, it almost seems as though you need some sort of failure or trigger to start that open mindset track. So by taking your quiz, it's almost like you can sort of skip over the failure and get right to it, if you know what I mean, right? So I think that's, but is that sort of a common thing that you need? Like in your research, does an event have to trigger this before you have this open mindset or before you start the journey?
I actually think it does. And I'm just gonna use a different phrase. I'm gonna call it a heat experience. I think in order for us to elevate, upgrade ourselves, we need a heat experience. Now, heat experiences can be something that occur to us that are outside of our control, like some sort of disaster or trial or something along those lines. And don't get me wrong, not everybody grows from heat experiences. It's the people who really harness those, and you got to have a certain mindset to do that. But I do think that we can create heat experiences. And that's what I think we can do with this mindset assessment and just learning about this, is it creates a heat experience. But I do think a heat experience is necessary. Now, the source of that, I think, doesn't always need to be the same for everybody.
Good.
You referenced the feedback from executives. And by the way, there's a lesson learned for everybody. You got a hot email from someone, and even you took the night before responding. If we had a time machine, I would like to go back in time and correct at least 10 emails where I responded in the moment instead of taking the night. But one of the things I come across, very frequently, guys, is we work with a lot of really successful people. So a lot of folks who are founders of organizations, run large businesses, enormously successful folks like David. And sometimes you're going to have a conversation with someone and they're going to come back and go, listen, I know this may not be perfect, but this is the way I am. And this has worked pretty well up to now. And I got to believe I kind of felt a bit that way myself up to certain days, saying, hey, maybe I have bad temper, maybe I'm too driven, maybe I'm too focused on work. But then you look around and go, hey, it worked pretty well. Yeah. And so what's our, when we come across that kind of individual, and I know you're a fan of Carol Dweck, and, she says sometimes the best way for somebody to start thinking about mindset is just to understand there's a possibility of changing.
Yeah.
But a lot of these folks want to always know, why would I even consider changing?
Yeah. Let me give you a framework that I found really helpful. I don't know if either of you are familiar with Whitney Johnson, but one of the things that she focuses on is learning curves, and how our growth over time is by hopping onto one learning curve. And when you hop on the learning curve, you start in a place of discomfort. It's flat, it's slow moving. And then you start to head up. And now this is exciting. It's invigorating. We're seeing a lot of growth. And then it starts to level out again because we get to a place of comfort. And what she says is that growth throughout life is by hopping onto different learning curves. And inevitably, if we're ever going to hop from one learning curve to another learning curve, it means that we're hopping from a place of comfort to a place of discomfort. And it oftentimes feels like stepping back. It's not too different. I don't know if you guys remember, it's been a while even for me, but driving a manual transmission.
Oh,
right,
yeah.
In a car, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're driving manual transmission, what you actually have to do to shift gears is you have to take your foot off of the gas, right? And we just get, when we're in that comfort mode at the top of our learning curve, we get really scared about, I won't make the progress if I take my foot off the gas.
Yeah.
And so here's some ideas that we've been talking a little bit about my book, Success Mindsets, and I've got a new book coming out called The Elevated Leader that talks about how we level up ourselves through a form of development called vertical development. And I think you'll find some of these, a framework and some statistics really interesting. Is it okay if I dive into that?
Please. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, please. Okay. We
Great.
love stats on this show, by the way.
All right. I'll give you some good ones. Okay. So one of the things that we've learned, and this comes from the field of developmental psychology, is that as children develop, they go through different developmental stages, and they do so rather automatically. Well, that's child development. What we've also learned is that adults can develop. They have different developmental stages, but not all adults do develop. So what they've actually identified are 3 different developmental stages. I call them Mind 1.0, Mind 2.0, and Mind 3.0 because they're representative of different internal operating systems. So at Mind 1.0, the base level, our internal operating system is programmed for safety, comfort, and belonging. We kind of operate like a good soldier. At that Mind 2.0 level, we are programmed to stand out, advance, and get ahead. We're now a progress maker. In fact, this is so dramatically different from Mind 1.0 that we are in this place where we are willing to be unsafe, uncomfortable, and not belong in order to stand out, advance, and get ahead. So that shift right there is a jumping from one learning curve to the other. And so that's, and I'll give you the statistics here after I tell you about that this third level. So the third level is what I call Mind 3.0. When we're here, we're not a progress maker. We are a value creator. We're focused on contributing, adding value, and lifting others. And that's how our bodies are programmed. So let me give you the statistical breakdown of adults in general here. As we think about jumping onto these different learning curves. If we start with 100 people, 64% of them stay at that base level. That means 36 out of the 100 will eventually level up to Mind 2.0 and become a progress maker. I happen to feel like sales cultures and sales contexts naturally help people make that shift.
Oh, great.
To being that progress maker. And when we're there at that progress maker level, we are very outcome focused. We're oftentimes short-term focused. I want what's my next sales target.
Sure.
Right. And I'll say, as somebody who, I guess it's been about 9 months ago, I purchased a vehicle, a brand new car. I went to the dealership, and afterwards I got a phone call from the dealership, and they said, what was your customer service rating? And I said 3 out of 5 stars. And they were ticked off. Like, they were mad. They're like, well, what can we do to get to 5? And I just said, throughout the entire process, I never felt like a person to you. I felt like a dollar sign.
There you go.
There was a lot of pressure. You guys forced me to make decisions in a time period that I didn't feel comfortable with. Ultimately, we ended up with our dream car, which is great, but it just wasn't a great process. And to me, it was just, these are sales reps, and some sales reps are even at Mind 2.0 are nicer than others. But these are some sales reps that are operating this progress maker mode. So 36 of these 100 people will eventually get there. Only one person gets to that third level.
Whoa.
Wow, that's interesting. So in your elevated leader book, I mean, if the mass population is dealing in 2.0 or 1.0, do you have some strategies for leaders to help, first of all, elevate those people and how to deal with that? Because that seems like could be the start of a lot of challenges that we face in getting to the next level ourselves in our own organizations.
Yeah, most definitely. And I would say that's the whole second half of the book. And I would just say, I love that you're asking the question, because it's how do we elevate, right? But before, if I could slow us down a little bit and just
Sure.
let us sit with these three levels for just a moment. There's just a couple of other thoughts that I think are helpful here. So what we essentially see in these statistics is 1 in 3 make this shift from that Mind 1.0 learning curve to that Mind 2.0 learning curve. 1 in 3. Only 1 in 36 make that next shift. Right? Some of the ways that I think you could talk about it is going from independent contributor to kind of manager and manager to leader, right? That might be a helpful example. But it's led me to ask the question, why do so few make that shift from that second level to the third level?
Mm-hmm.
And what I've come up with, and I'm not saying this is 100% accurate, but when most people at that Mind 2.0 level, these progress makers, they are very successful. They have had success in their career. They have created corporations. They're usually financially well off. And they're operating right now at a place of comfort. And it's really hard to tell somebody who's in a place of comfort, financially well off, in a good position, to jump to a new learning curve, which means getting uncomfortable. And I just think that that's, for everybody, that is a really difficult proposition. But if we can make it, that's where the magic happens. Is the best people, the best leaders are the ones who fully embrace becoming a value creator. And here's why that is because when we operate at that Mind 1.0 or Mind 2.0 level, our focus is on ourselves. Either us standing in or us standing out. It's only when we get to that third level that we are now focused on something bigger than ourselves. And that could be our customers and creating value for them, or our stakeholders, whoever those might be. But let me give you just some more statistics. And I do want to get to what you're talking about, David. But sure. There's also been research done on executives. And the statistics there are wildly different than the average than the population at large. So for executives, 7% are at Mind 1.0. 85% are at Mind 2.0. And 8% are at Mind 3.0. So the vast majority of executives, and I would, to me, it's been confirmed in the work that I do with executives and executive teams, but the vast majority of them are progress makers. They are usually more focused on outcomes than on creating value. Right. So I had a phone conversation the other day with a sales rep, a head of sales in this organization. And I said, how do you guys judge success? And she said, double-digit growth year over year. And that's great, but that's their focus. It's on an outcome. It's me getting that outcome. And there was no discussion about success is creating value for our customers and stakeholders. They just didn't value success in that way.
Can I push a little bit there on that one, Ryan? Because by the way, I love this conversation, love these stats. And I'm very empathetic to that sales leader you just talked to, or the CEO who would, if you're a CEO of a SaaS company and you come back and say, success is growing our business for the next 4 years at 30% year over year, their shareholders and their employees who are also shareholders take that's the unicorn path, right? That's how you take a company from $1 million ARR to $1 billion valuation, is the triple, double. Mm-hmm. So in doing so, sometimes that drive really is, if you come across the right leader, really is driven by the fact that everyone in this place, their life will change. Yeah. And I think you also, what we find with really advanced leaders is they know they have no chance of achieving any form of significant growth unless every meeting they're in is about the client and creating value. So she may not have articulated that, but most of the folks these days understand, hey, unless I'm in there driving a better life, better outcome, better future for the person I'm interacting with, I have no chance of winning anymore.
Yes. No, you're spot on, right? It's where is our focus? Is it on the lagging indicators like double-digit growth year over year? Or is it on the leading indicators such as creating value for our stakeholders? And the degree to which we do that, of course, we're going to grow. That's going to be a natural byproduct of us doing exceptional work, for sure.
Okay. I got to tell you, Ryan, what you just described is actually, I think, a blog on your website, right? And I can't believe, like, I mean, you know, after reading your book, I went to your website and I started reading all these blogs, and they're fabulous, by the way. They're short, they're to the point, and they're full. And yesterday I had that exact article up with the statistics, and you also have a bunch of point forms in that blog that sort of help you identify, you know, some of the traits of somebody who may be in one of these. And I was on a call, and just by chance the blog article was up, and you know, it sort of saved me from going down a different path, because I said, okay, this person's a level 2 here and this, and I changed the way that I approached the call with the person. You know, I'm really curious. I know I asked the question how, but now since we're talking about a little bit more, it's like, what advice would you give to people that are dealing with these different levels to try to help them maybe to get to the next level? You know, it's I'm sort of curious about that.
Without creating the challenge event.
Yes, that's right.
You know, we say, hey, oftentimes it might be a negative situation where we say, hey, I've got to change. And Ryan, you spoke to that in your book about your time as professor, then over to Gallup, then back to being a professor and saying, hey, something's got to change here. But how do we help folks see the value in trying to get uncomfortable?
Yeah. So if I'm a leader and I'm thinking, how do I help my people to elevate?
Yes.
The priority has got to be safety. Because what makes us hold on to us standing in or us standing out is always at the root is fear. And so one of the things that I've tried to do is I've tried to identify the best and most transformational leaders that are out there and study what they do uniquely to help their people in their organization to transformationally elevate. So some of these leaders that I've identified and I've studied are leaders like Satya Nadella at Microsoft, Alan Mulally at Ford, Ed Catmull he was at Pixar Animation, then he transformed Disney Animation, Indra Nooyi at PepsiCo. I think Reid Hoffman does some really good things at Netflix. So these are some of the leaders that I focused on. And as I've studied them, they do 3 things that are unique that I don't see other leaders do. And I think they do it in this order. Is one of the things that they do is they get really clear on a purpose. So when Satya Nadella took over as CEO of Microsoft, that he said, I spent my first year listening so that we could create a purpose. And they created this purpose that's all about helping people to change the world. Our job is to help people to change the world, right? Which is already, you can see how they've got a value creator purpose. The second thing that they do is they identify really clear values. Like the number one value that Alan Mulally had at Ford was love them up. And that's for everybody we're with. We love them up, right? And there's all these organizations have their own set of values. Like at Pixar and Disney Animation, one of the values was candor. And I think they identify purpose and values and get really clear on those first, because those then become the filters by which all other decisions are made. Including, which then is the third thing that I think they focus on is psychological safety, which is really just another way of saying they're focusing on culture, right? Satya Nadella comes in as CEO of Microsoft and he says, the C in CEO stands for curator of culture, right? A Mind 2.0 leader would never say that, because culture is never going to lead to short-term wins. It only will lead to long-term transformation. And so those are 3, I think, primary things that the most vertically developed leaders focus on to help create the space in which the people within the organization or department, division, whatever it might be, might have to themselves get over their own fears so that they can elevate.
The psychological safety is one I really want to touch on. And by the way, we're going to go back to defining, mindsets and the 4 types of mindsets in a second here, guys. But just on this psychological safety, we all know this, and I know listening to what and reading what you've done, Ryan, you understand the world of sales well, and you coach a lot of sales leaders. So we have this environment in professional sales where we do have to hit a number. So we can't run from it. We can't hide. That's the life we chose. What's on the scoreboard matters most. And we want to create those environments that where people feel accountable. But you're absolutely right. We want to have environments as well where people feel challenged, but also safe to speak up, and that, they'll be treated with respect and they'll be treated with dignity. So how do we balance the two, between accountability and drive for results, but also balance that against having an environment where there's psychological safety?
Yeah, really good point. So here's what and maybe this is a great place for us to dive into these 4 sets of mindsets. Is that okay?
Yeah, great. Please, and thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I've identified, and this is not my good ideas, it's just me summarizing the last 40 years of mindset research, but there's 4 sets of mindsets that have been researched. Not that there's other mindset sets. These are just the only ones we have significant amount of research for. So in these, there's fixed and growth. So fixed is I'm focused on looking good and I don't want to fail. Growth is I don't need to look good. I just want to learn and grow. There's closed and open. Closed is I know what's best. I need to be right. And open is I might be wrong and I want to find the truth and think optimally. There's prevention versus promotion. So prevention is I'm trying not to lose, and promotion is I'm trying to win. And then there's inward and outward. And inward is I am more important than others. And outward is others are just as important as myself. And the difference is when we're inward, we see others as objects, either obstacles that get in our way or instruments to help us get where we want to go. And outward is we see others as people and we value them as such. So that's a really high level overview. Is that okay if we
can
dive back into those? Okay. Yeah. Here's what I find with sales organizations most dominantly is they are really strongly promotion minded. They want to win. They have got clear goals. They have got clear objectives. And so sales groups are usually off the charts in terms of that promotion mindset compared to most other groups that I work with. But what I also find is that the one mindset set they struggle, I would say they most dominantly struggle with, there's a couple of others that they commonly struggle with, but most dominantly struggle with is an inward mindset. So what's going on is they're really outcome oriented, yet they think that they are more important than others. Like this is that car salesman example, is I need to hit my numbers and you're an object to help me to do that.
You're a deal in my funnel.
Yes.
You're not somebody who's buying a car that's going to change their life and their lifestyle and achieve a dream you've had since you were a child. You're actually a name in my funnel that I got to move from, opportunity into close.
Yes. So to me, that's always a priority and a focus is that's one of the mindsets that we've got to focus on is helping people to see others, particularly customers, not as objects, but as people. We've got to value them. We've got to be willing to step into their world. And I think one of the things that does play a role here is also the fixed mindset. Because one of the things about when people have a fixed mindset, and oftentimes it's the culture that brings out that fixed mindset of them because they don't want to fail. If they fail or don't hit their numbers, then that means that they are a failure. At least that's how they interpret it. And so I think sometimes leaders aren't as outward minded and they don't create the psychological safety that's okay. If you don't, like the same organization where they were talking about double-digit growth year over year. One of the things that the head of sales also said to me is, I don't know why we do it, but we do it. But we create arbitrary deadlines for sales numbers, right? It's the end of the month. And the reality is like, if I've got a quota to do $10 million by the end of the month, and I have $2 million on the 30th, and I have $20 million on the 1st, I failed. And it's just like, no, like this is a complete arbitrary deadline. And this person is clearly exceeding all expectations and seems to be doing what is right. Mm-hmm. But it's that fixed mindset. If that person feels like that $2 million, that month is it, then, and they see it as a failure, then they turn inward for themselves. And now they're in self-protection mode. And it's really hard to care about the customer when we're in that self-protection mode.
You know, Ryan, that really reminds me of some of the simple things in your book. But I was thinking about just the words that are in your head and the effect on your mind frame moving forward. So that example really hits home in a lot of ways, that you have this successful person, they're failing because of an arbitrary number, and then that sort of derails their mindset for the future. That's pretty powerful stuff to recognize, actually.
It's also that timing, David. I find it Ryan points out aptly, you know, in some cases it's random when you think of these things, mm-hmm. but frankly, industry-wide, it's not random. It's the way these publicly traded companies operate. And the difference between the 30th and the 5th of the next week is someone's job.
Can be, yeah.
So it is. And so today, what we're all dealing with as sales leaders is our tenure. If you're a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, your tenure is less than 18 months, according to Gartner. Your tenure is less than 18 months because of that. So it's almost this perfect storm that makes it so tough for that sales leader. It's almost impossible for them not to be a little inward, and for sure their promotion's off the charts. But I find when you've spent your life working with all of these types of people, some people just go above the noise.
Yeah.
And they almost play at this higher plane of existence that says, yeah, I'm not gonna get caught up into the day-to-day and the panic. And they just focus on the 3 or 4 things most important. And they live their life for sure with purpose and clear values as a person, not just a professional. So I'm not going to put somebody in that zone of being psychologically unsafe. I'm not going to treat people badly or demean them, and so on and so forth. So it's just such a fantastic conversation, because I also think the power of this mindset, and I love the way you wrote this book, Ryan. This is the difference between someone spending their, the decade between being 30 and 40, being either blissfully happy or miserable, even though they've achieved the same level of success. I think it's the mindset. How are you? What's the big picture? All of that kind of good stuff. It's just so incredibly important. So by the way, team, today we've talked a lot about, Ryan's fantastic book. And by the way, his website and his blogs, which are amazing, but the book is Success Mindsets: Your Keys to Unlocking Greater Success in Your Life, Work, and Leadership. Life, work, and leadership. All the links to everything David brought up today, like the great survey about your mindset today, and the blogs, they'll be all be in the show notes. Ryan, how else do people learn more about you? Because I think they're going to want to after today.
No, I appreciate it. I love the energy, and I appreciate you letting me share. So website is great. Second best place is probably LinkedIn. I would be happy to connect with anybody there.
Oh, that's great. Hey, Ryan, first of all, thank you for joining today. So when David and I were doing the prep, and we love everybody on our podcast, we love every topic or we wouldn't do it. But we were just saying, we're recording this on a Friday. We're going, what a great Friday. And we're so excited for this conversation. And you certainly didn't disappoint. And this won't be the last time we chat, for sure. Hopefully,
yeah.
So thank you so much for that.
And Mr. When does the book come out? Sorry, Mark. When does the book come out, Elevated Leader, Ryan?
Yeah, the Elevated Leader is set to come out on October 11th. So I feel like I'm about ready to birth a new child. I'm just like eager with anticipation and just having it get out into the world. So,
Oh, congratulations. And so, David Fauser, thank you for joining today.
Yeah, I actually wish this was like a 5-hour podcast today, Mark, because there's so much more I want to talk about. So hopefully, Ryan, we can have you back because there's a lot more questions I'd love to ask you at some point in the future.
let's do it. That'd be great.
Yeah. Or by the way, when we do the party road trip down to Southern Cal, we'll just buzz by and connect in with Ryan, and we'll have the same conversation over lots of beers.
Perfect.
Let's do it. Yeah. Hopefully you're not cycling here, but
Yeah. And finally, the third group gang to thank today is all the listeners. Everybody, thank you so much for taking the time. The Selling Well podcast exists to try and improve the performance and the professionalism of B2B sales. And our real intent, our joy is to have these podcasts so you get some strategies, processes, tools, mindsets that you can apply to you and your business and your industry today. So first of all, thank you so much for joining. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast. And if there's things that we can do better, speaking of today's topic, we actually do want to know. So please send me an email to my personal email, markcox@inthefunnel.com, markcox@inthefunnel.com. We do love constructive criticism. So let us know, what can we do to make these more valuable to you? And thank you for your investment in time. We'll see you next time. Hey, David, what a great conversation with Ryan. What'd you think?
Well, Mark, at the end of it, I said I would have liked to talk to Ryan for 5 hours, and that actually wasn't a joke. Because I think that from a lot of it, I just was left wanting to, I've got so many more questions to ask him because this Ryan is just a wealth of knowledge, and he just has a way of almost simplifying it to a certain extent to help you understand. What were your thoughts?
Well, I think the topic of mindset is really well worn. Like, he brought up the fact as part of his Ph.D. he had to do 40, he's researching 40 years of information and research on mindset. What I really love about Success Mindsets, his book, is he sort of aggregated all that stuff. He's like the Google of mindset. He came up with 4 different types of mindsets, the fixed growth, closed open, prevention, promotion, inward, outward. He identified, for those of us in the sales professions, where do we normally play on that continuum? Right? We're really about promotion and hitting numbers, and that's super important, but we're a little inward focused on us and not other people. I loved what he was talking in terms of mindset 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 for his next book that's coming out, and this topic of vertical leadership. So I just loved it. And by the way, a topic like this, you and I were chatting before, but it's just awesome to do a podcast because it really forces us to go and learn, what this person has put together. And you're so much better at the research than me, but you read the book, you're on his website, you read his blogs, you saw him in 5 other podcasts. First of all, I really appreciate that, David. So thanks for doing that. But it just makes for such a great conversation. By the way, I hope the people who are listening to the podcast do the same thing.
Yeah, it was a bit of like Ryan's prep was a bit of a black hole because whenever I think, Mark, when you're reading things and you're looking at things and then it's really good quality. Yeah. And then you just want more, and then you read more, and then you're listening to podcasts and you're on his blog site, you're doing his tests. And I just really appreciated because a lot of the stuff that he provides is free of charge. Yeah. And, and I think that, everybody, there's a lot of people out there, we talk about mindset from a big picture perspective, is I don't get any training at my job. No one trains me. Well, you know what, link up to a guy like Ryan and you can train yourself if you got the right mindset on a lot of these things. And at least to be able to know what you don't know and to try to give you a bit of a direction. And I really just think that was fantastic. And he was just a wonderful guest and a really quite intelligent human being, to be honest with you, and somebody I think that I'm going to continue to follow. This new book that he has coming out, I'm going to be definitely devouring that the first chance I get.
For sure. By the way, smart guy, professor at Cal State.
Yeah.
right? Professor, you didn't drink himself through Western like I did. Right? He's actually a professor, not a drunken student. Well, you know what, a gang out there, the truth of it is this ends up being the joy of this podcast, frankly. And by the way, just so everybody listening catches this, it's not like we ever have extra time to prep and read these things. I always feel like I'm on this treadmill where I'm about an hour late and, 40 pages behind on everything we do. I really feel that way. And you're scrambling and I got to read, I got to get up at 5 a.m. to read this thing in the next 3 days. And then you get into it and go, man, this is fantastic. And, what can I grab? Boy, when like the one thing where he's talking about the 3 different levels of leader, mindset 1.0, mindset 2.0, mindset 3.0, where you're creating value. And it's about making everybody else about everybody else, not just about you. It's about everybody else. You just feel better if you live your life that way.
I was going to ask him that, Mark, and that's the one thing that I wish I had more time for is there any sort of quality of life that you would get from being at that value creation? And, one of the things too about the podcast that I was reminded about is he talks about these 5 or 6 leaders that he looks up to or that are this value creation leaders. They still have quarterly deadlines. They still have immense amount of pressure, yet they've been able to elevate themselves and to really provide a better quality of life for those that they lead as well too. And I think to me, that's the most exciting thing about his new book coming out is because I think that mindsets was a lot about internally your mindsets, right? And I feel the leadership is everybody around you and trying to elevate them. And I'm hoping that that's what that's going to be about. One question I had for you, Mark, about the book specifically was, I think that one of the main challenges that I see with mindsets and trying to get to that, what he calls a hot spot, it's the ability to actually identify what your mindset is. I think that can be a challenge because I don't want to talk about like gaming the system necessarily. Mm-hmm. It's more about like, how do I see myself from a lens that's critical? And even if you go to other people, not everybody sees you every day. So it's hard for them to really give you that real critical feedback to help you. So I do think it's a journey that's never ending and one that you have to continue to calibrate and be critical of yourself if you really want to try to improve it, I think. What are your thoughts?
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you always like to think you're the right side of I like to think I'm that 1%. There's no way I'm the 1%. There's no way. And so unlike you, I didn't do the test before today. I'm going to do the test now. I tried it really early today, but I messed it up a little bit. But, as you and I were talking offline, we did this great podcast. And then I had this conversation, other professional conversation that was a disaster. And it was completely my fault. And it doesn't feel like that in the moment. It doesn't feel like it's my fault. And I went into the wrong way. I had the wrong mindset. During the call, it didn't go well. So now I had a worse mindset. And so I think it's this thing where hopefully you've got some people around that keep you a little bit honest and, let you know what your mindset really is or give you some triggers and people that you can trust. We talked about that psychological safety. And he gave the example of somebody who gave him some feedback on his test, on his survey there and assessment. And he said, oh, I don't believe this. And the next morning he said, so he sent an email where he's angry. He sends an email the next morning going, I talked to my wife and maybe it's a little more accurate than I thought. Yeah. And there's somebody, for the most part where you've got psychological safety. And that happens a lot with, I'll say my beautiful wife, Donna, like at times we're going to have a conversation about something and she's going to say, you really do have to let that go. Mm-hmm. Like I'm talking about something that's happened at work or something with somebody, and she'll say, you know what? Because she knows what I'm like and she knows there's a trigger and you're going to have to let that go. And because it's so safe, I can go, you know what? Let me take that away and process it. You're probably right. Or when I'm in the middle of having a bit of a conniption, she'll go, you should step away from your computer. Anything you email now is not going to go well.
Right. So you're saying then, Mark, that like the mindset in a sense is something that you have to continue. Like you're never going to get there and I'm there. it's sort of something that you have to continue to work at and chip away at and
Wouldn't you think?
recognize.
Don't you think so, Dave?
I absolutely think so, because I mean, there's been times I've phoned you in a bit of a state, and thankfully I've got a friend like you that I can call and sort of just let it out there, and by the end of it, I do feel better because you have been able to change my mindset to a certain extent and look at it from a different perspective, and it does sort of calm things down a little bit. But it's like that Ray Dalio, that when he talks about, seeking the truth, right? Everything starts with the truth, and the truth is different from everybody's lens to a certain extent, right?
Well, you know what? And that was the other cool thing that Ryan brought up at the beginning, which was your mindset's like just lenses, looking through glasses with different colored lenses. And one of the nice things is when you call me in those situations, I've got the pure lenses on where I don't have any history. I don't have any background. I didn't get triggered. I didn't just come out of the conversation. I don't have all those things. So I can maybe see in a more objective way. Whereas, as I mentioned, this conversation I just ruined, I'm in the middle of it. I can't see any of it. I've got the bad lenses on. And it started that way and it got worse and then finished that way. So, hey, it's like fitness. It's a lifelong journey to continue to get better. But, progress, not perfection, as my friend Dan Sullivan likes to say.
Yes, absolutely, Mark.
Hey, thanks for joining today, David. Great conversation.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Mark.
We'll see.